This is actually the last installment here of this course. And we have been discussing the issue of the Jew as a creator and as a creation. And I think the focus has been on the first installments that the concept of the creation mentality, in other words, seeing oneself as a creation. And I think that that's universal because that applies to all of us equally. The idea of creativity as being a creator is, I think, also pretty much universally applicable, even if certain people don't see themselves as being particularly creative. But in reality, all of us are involved all the time in creating things, whether we see it that way or not. But a creative person certainly is a person that goes, out of his way. He's particularly stimulated by creating new things of one sort or another, and that could be anything. I mean, it encompasses a tremendous range of different kinds of activities. Just in terms of standard creativity, the way we think of it, a lot of it has to do with talents. If you were endowed with a particular ability to do something that maybe not everybody can do well, and also with an interest, you're motivated to want to do something, to spend time on something, even if you're not necessarily rewarded, in any way for it. It's some kind of it's a weird thing, because a person who's creatively motivated is a person that is, it doesn't really matter if they're being rewarded for the amount of time that they spend on something. I think that's particularly evident today in the fact that the way that things are going, because creativity is so widespread, it's so available to people, and people can do it so easily, especially with technological advances and things like that. There are a lot of things that are available to people that weren't in the past. And at the same time, probably because of that, people are not willing to pay money for these things, or the people who are doing them are not rewarded very much for them unless it's on a very, very large scale. So in other words, people aren't making money at this. But I don't think that they ever really were. I mean, to a large extent, people were always had self-motivated, did things whether they were appreciated or not. So in any case, it's just one of those things that a person is going to do anyway, because it's part of them. So one thing, a motion that I wanted to go last time I didn't get to it was just again in terms of the more of the creation mentality. It's the idea that we're created with tremendous amount of tools and an amazing world, and that world is really custom made for us to do something with it. I was thinking of a moshel, for example, of a person would be have a very, very expensive and state-of-the-art manufacturing facility for cars. And he would have a particular friend, and he wants to give this friend this tremendous, amazing car. So he designs a car like custom made for this person, knowing what he likes and what he does and how he does things and everything, knowing everything about him. Such a very close friend, and he wants to just give this to him as a gift. So he creates this amazing, amazing car, and it has all these features and all these abilities, and can do so many different things, and you can do so many different things with it. And he gives it to the guy, and the guy doesn't appreciate what he's been given, and he just kind of uses it to drive to the grocery. And this is like a state-of-the-art type of machine. And you'd think that the only reason why he wouldn't take the time to explore all of the possibilities of what he can do with it, he just didn't take it seriously. It was, he didn't believe that this friend would give him such a tremendous, expensive, amazing thing just for him to do what he wants with it, basically. So in a sense, Hashem has created, first of all, an entire world, an entire cosmos, which is based on the human being, as the human being as being the pinnacle of creation, basically at our service, at our fingertips. He gives us, he gives us a body. A body is incredibly amazing thing. And he gives us a mind, and he gives us all these different things we're talking about in that chart, all the different levels of Shama and everything else. And a person, the only reason why a person wouldn't want to maximize what he can do with those things is if he doesn't really believe that the power of what he was given, and the fact that he didn't pay anything for it. He was just, this is what he was born with. But we don't take seriously what Hashem has put into the world, has put into the creation, and how it interacts with us. In other words, what's the interface? What is Hashem is basically saying, here, I'm giving you this silver platter. I'm giving you all of these things. All you have to do is take time and have the interest to develop it and to see what are the possibilities and the opportunities that you have to really maximize your relationship with these things. And people don't maybe take seriously enough. I think partly is because we have certain expectations and certain goals and desires that we think are the priorities in our life, and we're going after certain things, and then it blinds us to everything else that's around. It's like we have a certain preoccupation of preconceptions of what we want to have in our life and what we want our life to accomplish or something, and then we just leave out so many things that it's kind of left by the wayside, like that expression, leaving money on the table. It's right there. It's there to be taken advantage of, and we don't take it serious enough to really to take advantage of it. Okay, so that's the basic concept of this creation mentality. Also, there's just from this parsha itself, we start talking about the Mishkan. The next few parshas, and they actually use. We talked last week about this idea of the tavnis and the mus, tzelem, and the tmuna, and here that word tavnis is actually used in the terms of the Mishkan, and it's used in the context. As Rashi brings down, it's used in the context of this is the Mishkan, but that same tavnis, that same design, is there to be used for all of the generations. That's the basis of the Beit Mikdash. The Rishon and the Beit Mikdash Sheni, and it will be for the Beit Mikdash Shlishi. It's they all have their subtle differences, but basically it's built around the same concept and around the same basic design. So that's exactly what we were talking about before: is that everything is just a scale model for everything else. And since the Mishkan as a whole is a scale model or a prototype for creation as a whole, so therefore the basic elements never change. They're just changing in terms of the size, and certain details, but basically they're there as a design for the whole thing. So this is this amazing thing that Hashem has given us, especially the deeper you go to Kabbalah and things like that Hashem has not only given us these things, but he's actually given us the wisdom to understand what they are and why it is that way. What are they? What do they symbolize? What do they represent? How is this microcosm of creation as a whole? And what do we do with it? How do we manipulate that? And the very idea that every mitzvah that we have in terms of a Mishkan, Beit Mikdash, is something that's corresponding to something that's happening in the creation as a whole, and all the mitzvahs that the Kohanim have, the Levim have, and everything else. For example, as a small example, which also relates directly to the idea of creativity, is this idea that I just saw it today, I believe, in the Chok, in terms of the Chok is a daily seder for learning, and they take part of the Zohar. Part of it is the Zohar that of course, that's from that parsha, and it talks about the idea that the Levim singing in the Beit Mikdash is connected the Maluchim and the Srufim in the higher worlds that are singing to Hashem. So when we have the consciousness that when we're singing the Psikut Zimra, for example, the davening, we're joining together with the Maluchim. Now, not only are we joining together with the Maluchim in terms of their same, we're basically singing all the same thing. They're singing Tillim also. So we're all praising Hashem together. but we are, in a sense, stimulating them. We're the ones who are giving them the cue to say these things. There's a beautiful description there of the idea of about the chusna kala by a chasna, that there's a music chasna. This is the accompanying the bride to the and things like that. This is stuff that we even have. There are minhagim like that today that we do, in terms of we accompany the chasna with music, because that's just a small, it's a remez, it's a reminder that this is what's going on in Shemayim. This is something that's happening on a much higher, wider scale. And right now, in our present existence, we can only imagine that, only be conscious that that is indeed what's happening. But in the world to come in Mitzvah Shem, we're going to actually see that happening. So it's something that we're going to be privy to experience in real time. So when we're talking about what is the goal of creativity to accomplish, I was just saying something on another mushal, is what does that mean? That was our role in this whole totality of creation, and how does the creativity come into it? It's for me anyway, it's a particularly inspiring image. The idea that there's in a larger ensemble, and this is not just true of classical music or something, it's also true of Jewish choirs and ensembles, and especially in previous generations, they made a very big deal of this, that you have a conductor, and a conductor is basically when you have a bunch of different elements in a larger ensemble, and each one of them is playing their own part, and they're all expected to come together and do this all synchronized together. And there has to be somebody that's leading it all. So that person is basically just standing in the middle. We saw this also when we went to this hotel, and they had this fancy choir, this chassidic choir. There's always a director, there's a conductor. Yeah, there's a conductor who's keeping it all together, and he's giving these. There's a chazan, and then there was a conductor for the choir.
He doesn't seem to be doing very much, Usually they look like they're just going,
No, it's first of all, giving the beat itself is an essential thing, because the beat changes, and they have to be together. They have to be synchronized together. So there has to be one person doing it, otherwise it falls apart. That's one thing. You see when kahillas try to sing together, very often it doesn't sound good. But the idea is that also the expression, he's bringing out certain parts and softening other parts. And there's a whole language of conductors and how they get the results that they do. And that's why in the classical world, this is the conductor is like the major figure in the orchestra. The whole interpretation of a particular piece of music is dependent on the conductor. So the idea is that the conductor is, in a sense, is essential for the orchestra to play. The orchestra's not going to play unless the conductor is there. Or tells them when to start, when to stop, and how to play everything, keeping them together. And he's really responsible for the performance of the orchestra or the choir. But on the other hand, on the other hand, if you take a conductor and put him in an empty hall, it could be the biggest hall in the world. If there's no orchestra there and he's just waving his hands, that's going to happen, right? So you need both. Both are essential. You have to have a well-trained orchestra that knows what they're supposed to do, and you have to have the conductor who's going to be there when they're there at the same time, and something's that when he makes these motions, something's going to happen. And also you have to have a relationship between them, because they have to understand his symbols. They have to understand the language that he's using. And, of course, there's a universality. Otherwise, you take a guest conductor or something. So obviously, there's things that they share, but there's the rapport between the conductor and his musicians is a really essential part of the whole thing. So we talk about, again, this idea that we are at the center of creation. We're at the bottom, and we're essentially that we're able to control or to stimulate everything else that's going on above us.
Okay.
Really waiting for us.
Question.
So,
do you know when Aaron Mayer is coming back?
There's a conversation going on there somewhere. Over in cyberspace.
Right.
Oh, it's not me.
To home?
Okay, sorry.
Right.
Okay, so you get this idea that we're not, on the one hand, the whole creation couldn't function without us. On the other hand, we can't function without the creation. And this is how Hashem set it up. So if we aren't aware of them, then they're not, then we aren't going to be able to behave in such a way that everything's moving the way it's supposed to move. And if we're not aware of how Hashem set up the whole thing to work, then obviously we have a problem with that. So there is a siddur, and the siddur is a seder, which is a seder of how exactly the tefillahs go and when they're supposed to be said, and all these rules set up because there's a cooperation that has to work, and we have to be aware of that, and also the more we again are tuned into that and conscious of that as it's happening, it's a tremendous hisoyus. It gives us a tremendous inspiration to of the larger scale of things and what we're actually doing here. It's not just a personal experience. It's a cosmic experience on a tremendously high level. So the idea, again, going back to the idea of the Mishkan, is the idea of taking the creation and making that a place for Hashem to dwell there. That was the whole thing that Hashem's constantly saying. I want to have a dwelling here in this world together with you. And that's a dangerous thing. And we saw that during the experience in the Midbar, he almost pulled out completely, and Moshe Rabbeinu begged them, stay with us, don't abandon us. And then, of course, the whole dynamic of the Beit Hamikdash and building the Beit Hamikdash, having destroyed again and going back to Golis and all this stuff. It's all talking about that. What's the whole dynamic? What's going on there is just the fact that Hashem wants to be here with us. He doesn't want to be in exile. He wants to be together, and we don't allow him to because we're not up to it. So get into corruption and all kinds of things that distance Hashem from the creation that he created specifically for this purpose. So again, it's about, if we don't take it seriously, if we don't have this, I'm constantly trying to get across, is that when we don't have that mentality, we don't understand that that's the goal. The real goal is not just self-fulfillment, or I should have a good experience, or I should be happy, or we're here as a Jewish people specifically because we're here to foster Hashem's agenda. Hashem created the world with a purpose, and he set it up this way for a purpose. And obviously, it's in our best interest to do what he's telling us to do, because that's going to be the most fulfilling and then everything fits into place and everything is doing what it's supposed to do, so everything makes sense. Obviously, it's the best way to be, but we have a Yetzer Hara, and we have our self-interest, and we have all kinds of other reasons why we want to do things. And we lose sight of that, and then things start not to make sense. So, when you think about it, you talk about a secular person that has all kinds of tightness on why does Hashem do this? If there is a God, then why does he do this? And why does he do that? And, it can't be that there's really a God because of this, that, the other thing. And they don't realize that that's why that's happening, because of them themselves. It's just that if they would act differently, it would be different. You just had the story now with the hostages. It turns out that this family was that the hostages were from, where this woman just started benching lift 3 weeks ago, and her husband started.
No. These two that came out last week, so they made Chabad made a gathering, a Shabbos gathering, and invited specifically families of hostages. I think this family they invited.
Wow.
And the wife benched lift, and they said you should continue benching lift, and your husband will come out. And then two men from the family, they said you have to put on tefillin, come tomorrow to my husband's office. The shlucha said, and he'll give you a pair of tefillin, you'll put on tefillin. And they really didn't want to. And they said, okay, we'll do it. And they put on tefillin every single day for these 3 weeks.
Wow. These are the guys. That one story is for one family and the other story is for the other guy?
No, this woman is this woman's brother and her husband.
Oh,
it's all one family.
One family.
These two.
They're two related?
Brother-in-law.
Well,
two brothers-in-law?
I mean, that's unusual because Hamas has been splitting up family members.
They're two brothers-in-law?
Yeah, this was the woman's husband and her brother. So yeah, brother.
Okay, so just to add that to all the other miracles that have been going on over the course of this whole thing.
I have it on the WhatsApp. Listen to my WhatsApp.
You know, and you think, and I always think this, you know, that if you give a person is given, I mean, I can't judge I shouldn't be tested for this, but it's kind of hard to understand why a person would be faced with a situation that's life and death situation that's not getting better, no matter what else they try. Why wouldn't they try this? You know, why aren't they open enough to just give it a try? You know,
in her 64 years of life, these people were completely secular, nothing.
Wow, so
Yeah.
I mean, my wife is studying. I'm about to say this. She's really into plane crashes, like a lawyer lady. You know? Researching. No, that one story is very good. There was okay. Don't go. We don't have to talk about it. We're not going to talk. There was a story about a plane crash, and we were talking to survivors of the plane crash, and there was a woman who was on the plane, and they knew it was going to crash, you know, and she had this idea, maybe I should pray to God, you know, and then she said, but how can I pray to him? I never did anything for him. Why should I ask him to do something
No,
for
why
me?
should I? How can I ask God to save me?
Right. I think that
I never
did
did anything for him.
Right.
And she was the only crew member that survived. There were another 5 people survived. It crashed into the ocean.
So anyways, in other words, a lot of it has to do with, excuse me, if we never consider this, and if this isn't part of our consciousness and a part of our awareness of who we are in the world and where we are and why we're here, excuse me, then it could be crucial, you know, decisions are not being made. We're not making intelligent decisions because we're not part of that. But when a person sees himself like his whole life as this is my role, this is who I am, then they will naturally make the right decisions. There won't be such a test because they'll be living in that world. If a person doesn't have that perspective, that's why in general I'm very into the concept of perspective. The person has to have the right way of looking at things and himself and everything around him, that looking from the right perspective. And then as I said, once you start seeing Hashem and everything, then it opens up a tremendous amount, and you're just amazed all the time. Because God says, Shavisa Hashem Negi Summit means all the time I'm looking, I'm seeing Hashem Mamash right across from me. So, yeah.
And you were supposed to say it 14 times.
14 times. Okay. Yes. So, and again, the more you know, the more you appreciate, and all the stuff. Okay, so that's one of the concepts that I wanted to get across. So, going back to this idea of the hisoidus. So this is something that came. From time to time, it comes back to me with tremendous clarity, and then I figure that this is what it's all about. You know, why do I keep forgetting that? You know, or why do I'm not, you know, totally in tune? And then all of a sudden, it's come back to such a power that I realize, you know, what this is really, really powerful, is the concept of chias, of this idea of the shefa and the life force, which is, again, the Kabbalah is constantly talking about. It's kind of the basis of Kabbalah in a sense, is through understanding things like this about how the world the cosmos is set up and the different levels, and the idea that there is a shefa, which is coming from the Ein Sof. It's really the core of all creation. Hashem himself is constantly infusing the bria, the creation, with energy, with a chias, with the power to exist, and that of course, you know, it also applies to doimim, even things that don't have a physical life force like a vegetation or animals or people. That is also being infused with existence, so the power to exist. So when you realize that is something that's constantly taking place, the question is, how does that work? Is that just something that happens by itself and we have no connection to it or whatever? And it's exactly the opposite, because we're told that there's a certain minimal level of life that has to be there in order for things to exist altogether. So the very fact that there were 6 days of creation before Adam Rishon was created means that it's capable of existing without man being here. But man was the whole tax, the whole building up to that. And then Adam Rishon was created, and that was, you know, then all of a sudden it had a a means of sustaining itself. They say one of the reasons why the bris milah is on the 8th day is that means that the child has to have gone through a Shabbos, and in order to give it that power to be able to survive and to continue living, it has to have gone through a Shabbos. It was the bris. So the idea is that Shabbos itself is, because it's the tachlis, is what's giving the entire bria the power to exist. So there's an idea of a life force that is transmitted from a source to a destination. And being, again, the fact that man is created on the lowest level is in order for us to have the capability from way down here to be able to bring that life force all the way down to the point of being in a level of gashmius, the olam asiya, which is the very furthest thing from godliness that there is, and be able to that we have that responsibility, in a sense, by being planted here in this world, that we have the possibility, we have the responsibility to bring that down. And how do we do that? Obviously through Torah and mitzvahs. Torah and mitzvahs. I said Torah, mitzvahs. That's the idea that we are able to bring that down. So we're talking about the act of creation. Everybody knows the machadish kol yom tu b'maaseh bereishis. Hashem is machadish the bria every moment, every day, every moment. It's a new bria in a sense. Something new coming down. What allows that to happen? Our avodah. That's that. If it wasn't for Lamad Tzadikim or Saidonim or whatever, the world wouldn't exist at all. It just wouldn't be there. There's no reason for it to exist. That's why Hashem created that. So when all of a sudden, when you see that, you see that we have this unique responsibility and this capability to for the existence of the world as a whole. It wouldn't be able to exist without us. So how do we do that, and how do we maximize that? Because again, as I said, there's a minimum level that everything can just be kept going. But that's not what Hashem wants. Hashem wants the maximum level. He wants us to bring it down in all of its glory and all the concept of mule kol ha'uretz k'voido, that the earth should be full of His glory, means that we open up, of course, ourselves, which is really kind of the first stop. You have to open yourself up, but then we open up everything to be able to receive that presence of Hashem. Because as we know from the concept of what Gan Eden, looks like, what that experience is, we look at what Mamad Har Sinai looked like. We look at what Yetzias Mitzrayim looked like. All of these seminal, experiences that the Jewish people has had over the generations, thousands of years, prove that what Hashem wants to have going on in the world is an extremely, extremely vibrant, brilliant, existence. It should not be dull, and lifeless and colorless and boring. That doesn't exist. That on the level of Hashem, it's so overwhelming that it has to be cut down. It's the whole idea of filtering. That it's like a subtractive type of thing. It will be overwhelming unless we cut it down. What it really is. So there are people sitting around, as I've said before. I keep talking about it because it's extremely important, for people to realize. It's similar to this idea of people being able to, think of a secular life as being something fulfilling or whatever. That people are faced with not being able to see the light. Basically, there was something that the original Prophet said, something about a person can go out in the something to that idea. A person can go out in the middle of the summer, the bright summer day, and he can close his eyes and he can think it's dark. And he thinks it's dark because he's closing his eyes. So what are all the tainas and what is all the negativity about? It's only because people are unwilling, even when they're faced with a choice, they're unwilling to open their eyes. So this is really, for me, a definition of the goal of creativity. Creativity is kind of like taking what people might be open to experiencing or to hearing or to seeing, something that they can experience with their senses, and enlightening them, stimulating them and exciting them and putting something into their, into their level of experience through a physical thing that all of a sudden opens them up or presents them with something that's outside of their normal experience, because it's focusing on the ideal as opposed to necessarily the reality. So as we talk about the idea of the nemus and the tselem and all this kind of thing, there are levels of existence that are on the way from koyach el apoyel, from potential to reality, that it really exists because they have to be there on the way down. You can't have a reality unless you've got a design. So but the design is not going to be fully implemented in reality, because that's our job. That's what Hashem given us to do. This idea of a tikkun. You're going to do something, you're masakin something, make it really the way it's supposed to be, or the way it was originally planned to be, then that's our participation in the creation. If Hashem would do that and everything perfect, so then we wouldn't have anything to do. We'd just be going, Adam Rishon is very interesting. According to Kabbalah, Adam Rishon really did have what there was a whole tikkun that he was supposed to do. And because of the Chet Tzadas, it prevented him from doing that. In fact, it even made things crash even worse. But the idea is
what that was? Do we know what that tikkun was? What was he supposed to do?
Yeah, there is. They talk about it. This idea of shviras hakelim, and that he was supposed to be malal all the netzitzis, and I would read exactly how he's supposed to do it.
He named them.
What?
He named
Yeah, that's it. That's right. That's part of the ticket. Right? So that was one of the things, and he actually did that. So at least that he did get done, but there was a lot more to do. So anyway, so man is here in order to do that for Hashem, because Hashem wants us to be his partner, and he doesn't want to do the whole thing on his own. And he's given us that that responsibility. So now, to a large extent, we're busy just cleaning up the mess we made, over various over the course of time and in our own lives. A lot of that is just like kind of maintenance work or fixing things that are broken. But there's a whole level beyond that, which is energizing and bringing down that energy to a point where it becomes alive. And when something is alive, then it's moving. And when it's moving, then it moves somebody else also to go from where they are to somewhere else. In other words, it's stimulating and enlivening. It's like the idea of hisoirus. Soirus means orer. Orer means to wake somebody up. That means a person who in some aspect is sleeping, and you can wake them up to have a desire to do something and to be really, motivated to go out there and live life in a different way and on a different level of awareness and clarity and simcha. Okay, and life, to experience life. So basically, we're here to be in that sense to be me'orer other people, ourselves, okay, other people, and the whole of creation. Because as I said, what we do influences higher worlds as well. So we're until the malachim don't start singing until we're singing. So that they're also dependent on us. So whatever we do is having that kind of effect. And again, when a person is aware of that, how can they not be motivated themselves to go out there and do what they're supposed to do? It's like a performer that's being paid thousands of dollars for a given performance, and even if they're not, because they just enjoy it so much, so they get something out of just getting people moving. They're clapping, they're dancing, they're singing with them or whatever. That's a very very stimulating experience for the performer and for the audience. One of the things I was going to say about Dean likes to give introductions, introduce people, right?
Yes.
Wait, before. There's an idea of the person who introduces. What's the point of that? Because it says talks about this, that there's a whole idea of tzinoirus, that there's these channels that through which the spheres transmit this energy from one to the other. And there's a relationship between those spheres, and certain ones go together and certain ones don't. There's a backwards, some are higher and some are lower in the chain, not to think in terms of Gashmis, but just to, because that's conceptually, that's where they are. And so he says that in order for a lower sphere to be able to mekabel from a higher sphere, they basically have to be facing each other and smiling at each other. This idea of smiling is that there has to be an openness to receive, an openness to give, and an openness to receive. The receiver has to want to receive, and the mashpia, the giver, has to want to give. So when the person who's introducing the performer is basically trying to break the ice between the makabel and the mashpia, there shouldn't be such a barrier between them, and he'll tell the audience something about the performer, let's say, to get them to take him seriously, like, well, this is a guy I should really listen to. And they'll tell maybe the performer something about the audience, and so he'll have more of a cheshik to perform in front of them. And then all of a sudden they have a relationship, and it's with a roots, it's a desire to be able to receive. So this is said all the time. They're talking about this idea of the spheres, the way that the transferring this shefa is that you got something on the lower line. So each sphere has itself a dual purpose, both to be received from what's higher than it and to transmit to what's lower than it. So it has to basically pivot. That's a pivot, and it has to be facing the one it's getting from, and then turning around and facing the one it's giving to. So that's a necessity. They can't just stay in their place and not have any connection with the other ones around it. Nothing's going to happen. It's not going to go anywhere. And here we're talking about the whole point of it is this transmission. There's an idea of going from higher to lower and from lower to higher. There's also an idea, as we know, that according to the enthusiasm of the audience, let's say, will stimulate the performer to give off even more and to put more energy into performance. So this idea again that this is a mutual thing. The more the audience wants to be makabel, the more the performer is going to want to perform, and the more the performer is performing, on a higher level. So then the audience responds even more, and it's mamash a cycle. It's going, higher and higher and higher. That's the whole dynamic of performance. Basically, that's why it's an exciting experience. We'll go to standing up and waving their arms and all this stuff because there's something there, something happening. Okay, and that's also why the whole thing is dependent on what we call a yichud. A yichud is when two separate and very often opposite, like masculine and feminine, entities come together. There's something that causes a confrontation, and through that yichud, that coming together, it causes a reaction. Just like, when you take two chemicals and you put them together, there could be an explosion, it could be, whatever. The idea is that they're not the same afterwards. There's something new is created from that interaction. If they're two, they have to know what goes together and what doesn't, or what goes together and nothing happens, or what goes together and there's an explosion. That's a negative thing. Or if it comes together and it's really causes something beautiful to happen. But it has to happen is that there is this confrontation and there is this combination, which and there's something that causes a this reaction to things. So that again is the idea of the creation is and we know on the most basic level, that's how life is created. That's how life starts because of that concept of the yichud. So the whole idea is that that the goal of creativity would be, number one, to create a keli which is capable of holding something that is important to transmit. So that's one idea. So for example, if a person creates a becher, wine glass, a beautiful wine glass. Let's see. Let's just take this a second. Hello, I'm in the middle of teaching right now. But what is it? Fine, no problem. The other one I had before. Anyway, okay, so yes, so you can take a keli and then you make a keli which is appropriate for the thing that you are transmitting, and that's why you make these beautiful golden goblets and things like that, and we find that in Beit Hamikdash itself. It's full of kalim that were made out of very precious objects with the greatest level of craftsmanship. And this was one of the examples of creation. To create a keli which can hold something of that value that has the kedusha, and then you can transfer that to wherever it has to go and distribute it to whoever has to get it, and they can and then it adds to the chashivas, to the importance of the thing itself, because a lot of the stuff that it has to have something that you can react to, that you can interact with. So a person, if you create a niggin, or you create a book or something like that people can, or a poem or whatever, that people can recite, a song that people can sing. These are then that thing itself is a keli that helps someone else then to be able to awaken that emotion or whatever in themselves or someone else. And the other thing is the idea of, as I say, the experience itself. If a person's, for example, a performer, they're doing something for someone else, they're doing something in front of someone else, they are using that experience in time to be something which you're elevating the time, because you are participating in that experience together. And then all of a sudden that becomes a memorable experience, a memorable moment that is preserved. That I know it's preserved in your memory because you've gone through it and it's something you can remember. You can reignite that memory, and that can also be a source of inspiration, just to remember something that you experienced on a very high level. People, I remember experience I had with great tzaddikim that are no longer here, that that just thinking about it raises me up a level. That's one thing. And then also the idea that when we, it says something when I was teaching Koheles, idea of kol kadosh tachas shemesh, is the idea there's nothing new under the sun, but if it's over the sun, then it is new. So in other words, as long as the thing is just in the gashmias and it has no spiritual connection, then it's taka forgotten. It has no kiyum. It doesn't continue. But if it's something just transcends the physical, it goes to a level of some kind of a spiritual reality, that is saved forever. That is above the sun. That's something that has a permanent place, and we'll see that kind of stuff in Shemayim. It's something that transcends. Perhaps we're here in this world specifically for that, to kind of the launching pad, kind of jettisoning out those moments, special moments that are on a level to be able to be preserved on that level. Okay, so I better start playing a little bit if I don't get anything. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to say, it's okay.
And because I said my father is a musician, so he brought a violin to play.
Thank you. So one of the things I want to say about again, the idea of a musical, chassidic music, for example, which I spend my time doing for the most part. It's based on the idea that you can go through levels of emotions or consciousness, or whatever, which again changes over time. And you're supposed to be able to go through some kind of an experience which becomes resolved. In other words, it's okay. Zoom is gone. Sorry, everything's shutting off today. So in other words, you're starting at one point, and you're hopefully bringing the person yourself, whatever the person, to a higher level that they weren't there to begin with. So if they're experiencing it and living with the thing itself, then it's something that's causing a transformational result on some level. So I have select a couple of nigunim, more slower, serious nigunim, that if you can try to, as you're listening, to try to take it step by step and feel it. You can't necessarily verbalize, emotions that you feel. I hope it relates to on some level. But there is an idea again of a progression and a resolution. So hopefully that's going somewhere. You see in Tehillim, for example. Tehillim are very much like that. They have a kind of a climax, and then they have a resolution at the end. And very often it's kind of it's an emotional journey that David Melech himself is going through, or whoever wrote that kapitel, that is going somewhere and then ends somewhere. So it's not just hanging. That's really there's a common format called ABC-B, where ABC is working up to the high section, and then B is coming back down to the previous section. So it's kind of a resolution.
You can mention that you're not a professional violinist, and that you just started, you taught yourself.
Yeah, that's all about 20 years now, so I better
My
be
husband, he played piano from the time he was 7, but he taught himself the violin.
Right.
I have a few lessons.
Yeah,
Basically.
Here and there.
And I'm not-
Right.
I do not play classical violin. So that's for sure.
right.
But,
It's not like classical.
hopefully-
Okay, here we go.
What do you do?
There's a similar one.
maybe something I wrote myself, which is to the words of Kol Riboy. The author of Kol Riboy actually was from Tzfas.
So was the other.
In Rajai.
Maybe that.
That's a particular example. Start in one place and going to another place.
What do you think I'm doing? I mean, I have a point.
What's the?
I have a point.
What? Yeah, they sing in the square also, but I'm not sure the word.
And I was
That's all stuff.
but thank you so much for everything.